The Daily Grind Café falls into stunned silence as Google CEO Jonathan Pierce walks through the door, his presence immediately recognized by the tech workers who frequent the Silicon Valley coffee shop. During their morning routines, shy barista Naomi Harper's hands tremble as she recognizes the man approaching the counter, the same executive, whose company she'd left 18 months earlier after a devastating personal crisis that had destroyed her confidence and derailed her promising engineering career. "Good morning, Ms. Harper," Pierce announces, his voice carrying unmistakable authority throughout the packed cafe. "I'm Jonathan Pierce, CEO of Google. I believe we need to discuss why one of the most talented software engineers who ever worked at my company is serving coffee instead of writing the code. That could change millions of lives." His eyes meet Naomi's shocked expression. "3 days ago, you debugged a complex machine learning algorithm in 15 minutes that my entire engineering team had been struggling with for 2 weeks. You solved it on a napkin while making a cappuccino." The gathered customers freeze in recognition. The barista who yesterday seemed invisible now faces the CEO who's offering to restore the career she thought she'd lost forever. And her answer will determine whether brilliance buried by trauma can be reclaimed. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. 18 months earlier, Naomi Harper had been one of Google's most promising senior software engineers. Her innovative work on machine learning algorithms earning recognition from technical leadership and positioning her for promotion to principal engineer. At 29, Naomi had built her career through exceptional technical ability combined with quiet determination that overcame both imposter syndrome and systemic barriers facing black women in technology industries where representation remained persistently minimal. Her contributions to Google's core search algorithms had improved results for millions of users, her code elegant and efficient in ways that senior engineers recognized as marking exceptional rather than merely competent technical ability. But personal crisis had shattered the carefully constructed professional life she'd built over 7 years at the company. Her mother's sudden cancer diagnosis, financial strain from medical bills, and accumulated burnout from navigating predominantly white male tech culture had triggered breakdown, requiring immediate departure. The leave of absence that was supposed to last 3 months had extended to permanent resignation as Naomi struggled with depression, anxiety, and complete loss of confidence in abilities that had once seemed limitless. "I can't go back," she told her former manager, Dr. Patricia Wilson, during their final conversation. "Every time I look at code now, I just see failure and everything I've lost. I need to do something completely different." Wilson had tried encouraging return. "Naomi, you're one of the most talented engineers I've ever managed. This crisis is temporary, but your ability is permanent. Please don't let this moment define your entire career." But Naomi's mental health had required distance from the high-pressure tech environment that had contributed to her breakdown, and returning seemed impossible when she could barely function through basic daily activities. The Daily Grind Café job had emerged from necessity. Rent required income, and making coffee demanded no technical expertise or high-stakes decision-making that might trigger anxiety overwhelming her fragile recovery. Owner Daniel Brooks had hired her without questions about her background, his small business requiring reliable workers rather than impressive resumes or explanations about employment gaps and career trajectories. "You're good with customers. You show up on time and you make excellent coffee," Brooks had told her after the first week. "That's all I need from my baristas." The simplicity had been healing, no complex problems requiring brilliant solutions, no performance reviews evaluating technical contributions, no pressure to prove herself in environments where she often felt unwelcome despite her abilities. Her co-worker Tyler Jackson had become friendly without being intrusive, respecting her obvious preference for quiet routine over personal conversation about backgrounds or futures beyond the cafe's daily rhythms. Regular customers like Mrs. Eleanor Grant appreciated Naomi's shy kindness and attention to their preferences, her gentle demeanor creating loyal following among morning regulars who valued consistency and genuine care, but Naomi's technical brilliance remained present. Beneath the barista uniform and carefully constructed emotional distance from the career she'd abandoned, her mind automatically analyzed patterns, optimized processes, and solved problems, even when she consciously tried to avoid engaging the abilities that had once defined her identity. 3 days before CEO Pierce's appearance, struggling startup founder Alex Whitmore had arrived desperate and exhausted, his laptop displaying error messages from machine learning code that was preventing his company's product launch. "I've been debugging this for 2 weeks, Whitmore had muttered while ordering coffee, his frustration audible. "My entire team is stuck, and we're running out of runway before our funding disappears." Naomi had glanced at his screen while preparing his order, her technical expertise immediately identifying the algorithmic error that was causing cascading failures throughout the system. The solution had appeared in her mind completely formed, her understanding of machine learning architecture, allowing instant diagnosis that would have taken even experienced engineers hours of methodical debugging. She'd hesitated, knowing that revealing technical knowledge would invite questions about her background and potentially expose the Google career she was hiding from. Everyone at the cafe, but watching, Whitmore's obvious distress had triggered empathy stronger than her desire for anonymity. She understood the desperation of technical problems that seemed unsolvable and the professional stakes of deadlines that couldn't be extended. "Excuse me," she'd said quietly, surprising herself. "I think I see the problem in your code. Would you like me to show you the fix?" That moment of compassion, despite personal anxiety, had set in motion events that would transform her carefully maintained anonymity into unavoidable confrontation with the abilities and identity she'd been desperately trying to escape. "Alex." Whitmore looked up from his laptop with obvious skepticism when Naomi offered to help with his broken code, his expression suggesting doubt that a barista could understand complex machine learning algorithms that had stumped his engineering team. "No offense, but this is pretty advanced machine learning architecture," Whitmore replied politely. "My team includes engineers from Stanford and MIT who've been working on this problem for 2 weeks without success." Naomi felt familiar imposter syndrome, returning the automatic assumption that she couldn't possibly possess technical expertise because she didn't fit expected demographics or professional context for engineering brilliance. But she'd already committed to helping, and retreating now would leave both Whitmore struggling and herself feeling cowardly about hiding abilities that could solve real problems affecting real people. "I understand it looks complicated," Naomi said quietly, her voice barely audible above the cafe's ambient noise. "But I think your gradient descent implementation has a learning rate that's causing oscillation rather than convergence. If you adjust the parameters here and modify this activation function, the model should stabilize." She grabbed a napkin and quickly sketched the mathematical corrections, her handwriting showing the neural network architecture modifications that would resolve the cascading errors, preventing successful model training. Whitmore stared at the napkin with growing astonishment as he recognized that her diagnosis was not only accurate, but demonstrated understanding that exceeded his team's collective expertise. "How did you—" he started, then stopped himself. "This is exactly right. You just solved in 30 seconds what we've been struggling with for 2 weeks. Who are you?" Naomi felt panic rising as she realized her technical intervention had created exactly the attention and questions she'd been avoiding for 18 months. "I'm just someone who used to work with code," she replied vaguely, hoping to deflect further inquiry. "I'm glad I could help. Your coffee is ready." But Tyler Jackson had been watching the interaction with obvious curiosity. Naomi, you never mentioned you knew anything about programming. That looked pretty advanced for casual knowledge. Coffee shop owner Brooks approached with interest. Harper, do you have a tech background? Because if you can solve problems like that, you might be working in the wrong industry. Naomi felt cornered by friendly curiosity that threatened to expose the career and identity she'd been hiding behind her barista uniform and carefully maintained anonymity. I used to do some coding, but I don't anymore, she said simply, hoping the conversation would end without requiring detailed explanations about Google or the breakdown that had driven her away. Whitmore was already implementing her suggestions on his laptop, his excited expression confirming that her solution was working exactly as she'd predicted. "This is incredible," he announced to the cafe. "She just fixed our entire production pipeline. Our product can launch on schedule because of a napkin sketch from a barista." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. His enthusiasm was drawing attention from other customers, several of whom were tech workers who recognized the significance of solving complex machine learning problems that quickly. Regular customer Mrs. Grant smiled with grandmotherly pride. "Naomi, dear, you're clearly brilliant at this computer work. Why are you making coffee instead of using those impressive skills?" The simple question carried weight that Naomi wasn't ready to address. Explaining would require acknowledging the depression, anxiety, and loss of confidence that had driven her from promising career into service work that demanded nothing of the abilities she no longer trusted. "I prefer making coffee," Naomi replied quietly, her tone discouraging further questions. "It's simpler and less stressful than tech work," but Whitmore was already photographing the napkin while asking permission to share the solution with his team. This is the kind of elegant problem-solving that only comes from serious engineering experience. "Are you sure you don't want to consult for my startup?" His offer represented exactly what Naomi had been avoiding, recognition of technical abilities that would inevitably lead to questions about her background, expectations about her capabilities, and pressure to return to the industry that had broken her. "I'm happy working here," Naomi insisted, her voice firm despite internal conflict. "Please don't make this into something bigger than a simple, helpful suggestion." But the moment had already escaped her control, and the technical brilliance she'd tried to hide was demanding recognition that anonymity could no longer contain. Over the following 48 hours, Naomi's quiet act of technical assistance escalated beyond her control as Alex Whitmore's gratitude transformed into viral social media phenomenon that attracted attention she desperately tried to avoid. Whitmore posted on Twitter with the napkin photograph. "A barista at my local cafe just debugged our production ML model in 30 seconds. She solved what our Stanford MIT team couldn't crack in 2 weeks. Who is this coding genius making cappuccinos?" The post accumulated 50,000 likes within 6 hours as tech community members shared, commented and speculated about the mysterious barista, whose casual brilliance suggested extraordinary background hidden behind service industry anonymity tech. Journalist Omar Johnson contacted the cafe requesting interview. This story combines mystery, talent, and questions about why brilliant people end up in jobs that don't utilize their abilities. "Can I speak with the barista who fixed the code?" Naomi refused all media requests while watching with growing anxiety as attention intensified rather than fading like she'd hoped. Her former Google colleague Kevin Rodriguez saw the viral post and immediately recognized Naomi's distinctive problem-solving approach. "That's Naomi Harper's coding style. I'd recognize her elegant solutions anywhere. Why is she working as a barista instead of engineering?" His public comment connected her cafe identity to her Google past, creating exactly the exposure Naomi had been desperately avoiding through her 18 months of intentional anonymity. Former manager Dr. Wilson called Naomi directly. "I saw the viral story and Kevin's comment. Naomi, why didn't you tell me you were struggling this much? We could have helped you transition back to tech instead of abandoning your career entirely. The concern in Wilson's voice made Naomi feel simultaneously guilty about disappearing and defensive about choices made during mental health crisis that had left her feeling incapable of anything beyond basic functioning. I couldn't handle tech work anymore, Naomi explained quietly. The pressure, the imposter syndrome, everything that happened with my mom, it all became too much. Making coffee doesn't require brilliance that I no longer trust myself to deliver. Wilson's response was gentle but challenging. Naomi, fixing that algorithm proves your brilliance is intact. Depression and burnout affected your confidence, not your ability. Have you considered that hiding from your gifts might be preventing healing rather than enabling it? The question struck uncomfortable chord. Had her barista anonymity been protective recovery or avoidance preventing genuine processing of the trauma that had driven her from promising career? Meanwhile, LinkedIn messages flooded her neglected profile as recruiters and startup founders offered positions based on the viral napkin incident. Your problem-solving ability is exactly what our company needs. Please consider joining our engineering team. The professional attention triggered anxiety rather than excitement. Each offer represented pressure to perform, expectations to meet, and potential for failure that her fragile confidence couldn't risk. Best friend Jasmine Lewis visited the cafe with direct confrontation. Naomi, you can't hide from your abilities forever. That viral moment showed everyone what I've known all along. You're brilliant, and you're wasting your potential because you're afraid of being brilliant again. Her blunt honesty cut through Naomi's defensive justifications. What if I try to go back and fail? What if I can't handle the pressure again? At least making coffee, I can't disappoint anyone or prove that I don't actually deserve to be in tech. Jasmine's response was compassionate but firm. You're so worried about potential failure that you're guaranteeing actual failure by refusing to try. The Naomi I know doesn't let fear make her decisions. Coffee shop owner Brooks approached with surprising insight. Harper, I hired you because you needed a job with no pressure. But watching you hide from obvious talent isn't kindness, it's enabling avoidance. Maybe it's time to stop running from who you actually are. His unexpected challenge from supportive employer who'd asked nothing about her past suggested that her anonymity was becoming prison rather than protection as viral attention continued escalating. While former colleagues and new opportunities pursued her, Naomi faced unavoidable question. Could she reclaim the technical identity she'd abandoned? Or would fear of potential failure prevent her from attempting the recovery that everyone else seemed to believe was possible? While Naomi struggled with unwanted attention at the Daily Grind Café, parallel developments at Google headquarters were creating institutional response that would transform viral incident into corporate priority requiring CEO-level intervention. Dr. Patricia Wilson presented the viral napkin incident during Google's weekly engineering leadership meeting. Our former senior engineer Naomi Harper just solved a complex ML problem in seconds while working as a barista. This represents both talent loss and potential diversity recruitment failure requiring examination. Her presentation included Naomi's employment history, performance reviews showing exceptional contributions, and circumstances of her departure that suggested institutional responsibility for burnout affecting high-performing employees from underrepresented backgrounds. Chief Diversity Officer Dr. Lawrence Brown recognized broader implications. Harper's case isn't isolated. We're losing talented engineers, particularly women and people of color, to burnout and imposter syndrome that our culture may be inadvertently reinforcing despite diversity initiatives. The institutional analysis elevated Naomi's situation from individual case to systematic problem, requiring comprehensive response rather than simple recruitment. Outreach.engineering director Thomas Lee reviewed Naomi's code contributions from her Google tenure. Harper's work on our core algorithms was exceptional. Losing engineers of this caliber represents significant institutional failure that we should be preventing rather than addressing after departure. CEO Jonathan Pierce, briefed on the situation during executive session, recognized opportunity for leadership, demonstrating genuine commitment to supporting, rather than just recruiting, diverse technical talent. I want to understand what happened with Harper and what we should be doing differently to prevent talented engineers from burning out. His personal interest elevated situation to priority, requiring direct executive engagement rather than delegation to HR or diversity programs. Meanwhile, tech community discussion about Naomi's viral moment had sparked broader conversation about talent waste and mental health in high-pressure industries. Blogger Nina Patel wrote, "The barista who fixed Google-level code represents thousands of brilliant people who've left tech due to burnout, discrimination, or environments that didn't support their well-being while exploiting their abilities." Her analysis connected individual story to systematic industry problems affecting retention of diverse talent that companies claim to value. Podcast host Derek Washington interviewed former tech workers about similar experiences. "I was senior engineer at major company until anxiety and imposter syndrome convinced me I didn't belong. Now I drive for Uber despite having skills that could contribute significantly if industry culture had supported rather than broken me." The testimonials revealed that Naomi's experience represented widespread pattern rather than isolated incident requiring individual rather than systematic response. Venture capitalist Victoria Stone began questioning startup founders about retention strategies. Companies focus on recruiting diverse talent, but neglect creating environments where that talent can thrive long-term. Harper's story should prompt industry-wide examination of our cultural failures. Professional discussion was transforming viral moment into catalyst for industry. Self-examination about whether technical culture genuinely supported or merely tokenized diverse talent. Naomi's mother, Gloria Harper, whose cancer was now in remission, called with maternal concern, "Baby, I see all this attention about you online. I never wanted my illness to derail your career. Maybe it's time to consider whether you're ready to try again." Her gentle encouragement acknowledged both the crisis that had precipitated Naomi's departure and possibility that circumstances had changed enough to permit different choices. Therapist Dr. Caroline Webb, whom Naomi had been seeing weekly, offered clinical perspective. The viral attention is triggering anxiety because it's forcing confrontation with the identity you've been avoiding. But avoidance isn't the same as healing. Perhaps this is opportunity to reclaim your abilities on terms that prioritize your well-being. Professional therapeutic support suggested that returning to tech might serve recovery, rather than threaten it if approached with appropriate boundaries and support. Sister Destiny Harper texted direct challenge. "Stop hiding from being amazing. Mom's cancer taught us life's too short to waste talent because we're scared. You're brilliant. Start acting like it." Family encouragement added emotional weight to professional and community pressure that was making continued anonymity increasingly untenable. As institutional, industry, and personal forces converged around her viral moment, Naomi faced recognition that her barista refugee was becoming unsustainable, precisely because her technical brilliance demanded expression that service work couldn't contain. Indefinitely, the question was no longer whether she would return to tech, but rather how she would navigate return in ways that honored both her abilities and the mental health challenges that had driven her initial departure as CEO. Jonathan Pierce made decision that would transform Naomi's viral moment from internet curiosity into institutional commitment, requiring personal executive engagement rather than standard HR recruitment procedures. I Want to meet with Naomi Harper personally, Pierce told his assistant. Not to recruit her, but to understand what we failed to provide that would have prevented losing an engineer of her caliber. His approach prioritized understanding institutional failure over simply recovering lost talent, suggesting genuine interest in systematic improvement rather than transactional recruitment. Pierce arrived at the Daily Grind Café without advance notice, his presence immediately recognized by tech workers whose morning routines included coffee. From the shop that had inadvertently become Silicon Valley talking point, Naomi was preparing orders when she looked up to see the Google CEO approaching the counter, her immediate panic response threatening to trigger anxiety that had been carefully managed through routine and anonymity. Ms. Harper, Pierce began gently, recognizing her obvious distress. I'm not here to pressure you about returning to Google. I'm here because your viral moment raised questions about how we support our engineers. And I'd like to understand your experience if you're willing to share it. His non-threatening approach slightly reduced Naomi's defensive panic, though her hands still trembled as she attempted to maintain professional barista composure. I don't know what to say, Naomi replied quietly. I left because I couldn't handle the pressure anymore. That doesn't mean Google did anything wrong. It means I wasn't strong enough. Pierce's response was firm. Ms. Harper, an engineer who can debug complex ML algorithms in 30 seconds while making coffee, isn't weak. If our environment contributed to burnout that drove you away, that's institutional failure requiring our accountability. His reframing of her departure from personal failure to systematic problem challenged the narrative Naomi had internalized about her own inadequacy. Coffee shop owner Brooks approached with protective concern. Mr. Pierce, Naomi's been an excellent employee who deserves respect. I hope you're not here to disrupt her life with pressure she doesn't need. Pierce appreciated the protective advocacy. Mr. Brooks, I'm here to listen and learn, not to recruit or pressure. Though I confess, I hope understanding leads to opportunity for Ms. Harper to return to work. She's obviously brilliant at performing. Dr. Wilson, whom Pierce had invited, entered the cafe with supportive intention. Naomi, I've missed working with you. But more importantly, I want you to know that leaving was understandable given what you were experiencing. Coming back should be on your terms, not ours. The validation from former manager who'd witnessed her contributions helped counter Naomi's internalized belief that departure had represented personal rather than circumstantial failure. Best friend Jasmine arrived as moral support, her presence reminding Naomi that she had people who valued her beyond her technical abilities or professional productivity. Pierce made unexpected offer. Ms. Harper, I'd like to propose something unconventional. Instead of standard return-to-work offer, what if we created role that prioritizes your well-being while utilizing your abilities? Flexible schedule, mental health support, explicit permission to maintain boundaries that protect your health. The offer acknowledged that standard employment terms had contributed to her burnout, suggesting willingness to adapt institutional practices rather than expecting her to simply endure problematic conditions. What if I fail again? Naomi asked, voicing her deepest fear. What if I can't maintain the level of performance that justifies the opportunity you're offering? Wilson responded with crucial reframing. Naomi, you're defining failure as anything less than exceptional performance. What if we defined success as sustainable contribution while maintaining your mental health? Your value isn't just your code, it's your whole self. Pierce added institutional commitment. Ms. Harper, I'm personally invested in ensuring your return succeeds. That means creating conditions that support you rather than expecting you to sacrifice your well-being for productivity. Metrics. As Naomi considered the offer that addressed her fears while honoring her abilities, she faced turning point. Continue hiding from technical identity that defined her gifts. or risk a tempting return, structured around well-being rather than performance maximization that had previously broken her. "I need time to think," Naomi said finally. "This is overwhelming, and I can't make decisions about my entire future during a coffee shop conversation." Pierce respected her boundary. "Take whatever time you need. When you're ready, we'll be here with support rather than pressure." 3 days after CEO Pierce's cafe visit, Naomi Harper made a decision that would transform her barista. Anonymity into intentional return to technical work structured around sustainable well-being rather than performance maximization that had previously destroyed her confidence. "I want to try coming back to Google," Naomi told Dr. Wilson during phone conversation that represented months of therapeutic work, finally enabling risk that terrified but also called to her. "But I need guarantees about flexibility, mental health support, and explicit permission to prioritize my well-being over productivity expectations." Wilson's response was immediate. "We'll formalize everything you need in your employment contract. Your return succeeds only if it's sustainable, and we're committed to creating conditions that support rather than undermine your health. The institutional commitment to adapting standard practices rather than expecting her to conform to conditions that had broken her represented fundamental shift in how her value would be recognized." Pierce personally attended Naomi's first day back at Google campus, his executive presence signaling institutional commitment that extended beyond HR protocols to CEO-level priority. "Ms. Harper, welcome back," Pierce announced during engineering team meeting introducing her return. "Naomi's rehiring represents our commitment to supporting engineers' well-being as seriously as we value their technical contributions. Her role includes explicit flexibility that we should be extending to all team members." His public framing of her accommodations as model rather than exception helped reduce potential stigma about receiving support that others might perceive as special treatment. At former teammates greeted Naomi with genuine enthusiasm tempered by sensitivity about the struggles they knew had precipitated her departure. "We're glad you're back, and we support whatever boundaries you need to maintain your health." The welcome without pressure created environment different from the high-intensity culture she remembered, suggesting that institutional awareness about burnout had prompted broader cultural shifts. Engineering Director Lee presented her initial project assignment. "We'd like you to work on algorithm optimization that plays to your strengths without requiring the deadline pressure that contributed to previous stress. Progress matters more than speed." The project scope acknowledged her abilities while respecting her need for sustainable pacing rather than performance maximization. Chief Diversity Officer Brown scheduled regular check-ins separate from performance reviews. "These conversations are about your well-being and whether we're providing adequate support, not about evaluating your productivity or technical contributions." The structural separation between support and evaluation helped reduce Naomi's fear that struggling would be interpreted as performance failure rather than normal adjustment process. Media coverage of her return focused on institutional change rather than individual comeback. Google CEO personally ensures engineers' return includes mental health support, setting precedent for industry. The narrative framing highlighted systematic improvement rather than treating her situation as isolated case requiring exceptional accommodation. Tech journalist Johnson wrote, "Harper's return with explicit well-being protections challenges industry assumption that high performance requires personal sacrifice. Perhaps we can have both sustainable work conditions and technical excellence." Professional commentary was transforming her experience into broader conversation about industry practices that had normalized burnout as acceptable cost of innovation. Within 3 months, Naomi's algorithm improvements had generated measurable impact, while her sustainable work schedule demonstrated that productivity didn't require the excessive hours and pressure that tech culture had normalized. Your contributions are exceptional, and you're working reasonable hours while maintaining your health, Wilson observed during quarterly review. You're proving that work-life balance enhances rather than diminishes technical excellence. The evidence challenged assumptions that had driven Naomi's previous burnout and supported cultural change, benefiting other engineers struggling with similar pressures. Pierce announced company-wide policy changes inspired by Naomi's accommodations. We're implementing flexible scheduling, mental health support, and explicit permission for all engineers to prioritize well-being. Sustainable excellence serves everyone better than burnout productivity. The institutional transformation used her individual case to justify systematic changes that would prevent future talent loss to conditions that had driven her away. Naomi addressed company-wide meeting about her experience. I left because I believed I'd failed. Returning taught me that the system had failed by normalizing unsustainable expectations. We can be brilliant without being broken. Her public testimony combined personal vulnerability with systematic critique that helped other engineers feel permission to acknowledge struggles without fear of professional consequences. The transformation from barista hiding her brilliance to engineer modeling sustainable excellence demonstrated that talent could be reclaimed when institutions adapted to support rather than exploit human capabilities. 6 months after Naomi Harper's return to Google, her sustainable work model had catalyzed comprehensive institutional transformation that extended far beyond individual accommodations to industry-wide reconsideration of practices that normalized burnout as acceptable cost of innovation. Google implemented the Harper Protocol, comprehensive mental health support, flexible scheduling, and explicit evaluation criteria separating well-being from productivity metrics that would apply to all engineers rather than only those in crisis. Naomi's experience revealed that our performance culture was inadvertently punishing engineers who prioritized mental health, Pierce announced during quarterly company meeting. The Harper Protocol ensures that taking care of yourself advances rather than hinders your career. The institutional policy named after her experience validated that her struggles had represented systematic rather than individual failure, requiring comprehensive rather than isolated response. Engineering retention rates improved dramatically as the protocol reduced departures among women and underrepresented minorities who had previously left at disproportionate rates. We're keeping talented engineers who previously felt forced to choose between their well-being and their careers. The measurable impact demonstrated that supporting mental health served business objectives rather than conflicting with them as previous assumptions had suggested. Tech industry competitors began implementing similar programs after observing Google's improved retention and productivity metrics. The Harper Protocol proves that sustainable work conditions enhance rather than diminish technical excellence. Professional adoption transformed Naomi's individual experience into industry standard that benefited thousands of engineers who had suffered under previous expectations. Naomi established mentorship program for engineers from underrepresented backgrounds struggling with imposter syndrome. I spent 18 months believing I didn't deserve to be in tech. Now I help others recognize that belonging isn't about being perfect. It's about contributing while maintaining your humanity. Her peer support program addressed cultural factors that had contributed to her breakdown while preventing similar crises for current engineers. Dr. Wilson conducted research on engineer burnout that used anonymized data from the Harper Protocol. Our findings show that flexible work conditions improve both mental health outcomes and technical productivity, challenging assumptions that drove previous practices. The academic validation provided evidence base for policy changes that might otherwise have been dismissed as accommodating weakness rather than enabling excellence. Mental health advocacy organizations recognize Naomi's impact on reducing stigma. By publicly discussing her breakdown and recovery, Harper normalized conversations about mental health in tech industries where admitting struggle had been career suicide. Cultural change around mental health discussions represented impact extending beyond policy implementation to fundamental shifts in professional acceptable vulnerability. Venture capitalists began requiring portfolio companies to implement mental health support. The Harper Protocol represents competitive advantage in recruiting and retaining top talent. Companies without comparable support will lose talented engineers to those prioritizing well-being. Market forces reinforced institutional changes as investors recognized that supporting mental health served financial objectives rather than representing charitable accommodation. Naomi received recognition from mental health organizations for advocacy work. Your willingness to share your story has helped countless tech workers seek support they previously would have hidden due to professional stigma. The awards acknowledged impact beyond technical contributions to cultural transformation that benefited entire industries. Her algorithm work continued generating significant technical contributions while working sustainable hours. Naomi's productivity matches or exceeds her previous output while maintaining work-life balance that protects her mental health. The performance evidence proved that accommodations enhanced rather than diminished her technical capabilities, challenging assumptions about necessary trade-offs between well-being and excellence. Tech conferences invited Naomi as keynote speaker addressing sustainable excellence. We've normalized suffering as badge of honor in tech culture. I'm living proof that you can be brilliant without being broken. Her public platform influenced thousands of engineers and company leaders reconsidering practices that had treated burnout as inevitable rather than preventable. LinkedIn profiles increasingly listed mental health support among benefits offered by tech companies. Harper Protocol implementation became recruiting advantage as talented engineers prioritized employers demonstrating genuine commitment to sustainable work conditions. Professional culture shifted as younger engineers particularly demanded work environments that respected human limitations rather than expecting unlimited availability and productivity. Google's stock performance and innovation metrics improved, following Harper Protocol implementation, providing business case for sustainable practices. Supporting mental health isn't charity. It's strategic advantage that enhances technical excellence while improving retention. The financial vindication ensured that policy changes would persist rather than being abandoned as experimental accommodation. 1 year after her return, Naomi had transformed from engineer hiding behind barista anonymity to industry leader modeling that sustainable brilliance served everyone better than the burnout culture that tech had previously celebrated. Over the following 24 months, the transformation catalyzed by Naomi Harper's return evolved from Google-specific policies into comprehensive industry reformation, addressing systematic practices that had normalized mental health sacrifice as acceptable cost of technical innovation. The Tech Wellbeing Coalition, established by multiple major companies, adopted Harper Protocol principles as industry standards. Mandatory mental health support, flexible scheduling options, and performance evaluation criteria that explicitly valued sustainable contribution over maximum short-term productivity. Coalition Director Dr. Angela Foster, recruited specifically to lead systematic reform, implemented measurement frameworks tracking both technical output and engineer well-being. We're proving that these aren't competing values. Supporting mental health enhances technical excellence. The data-driven approach provided evidence that convinced skeptical executives that supporting well-being served business objectives rather than conflicting with them. Universities updated computer science curricula to include mental health awareness and sustainable work practices. We're preparing students for careers that honor their humanity rather than treating them as productivity machines. Educational reform addressed cultural problems at their source by teaching emerging engineers that sustainable excellence represented professional ideal rather than compromise. Venture capital firms required portfolio companies to implement well-being protocols as funding condition. Companies that burn out talented engineers represent poor investments. Sustainable practices correlate with long-term success. Financial incentives reinforced cultural change as market forces supported rather than punished companies prioritizing mental health. Naomi's mentorship program expanded into non-profit organization, serving underrepresented engineers nationwide. The Harper Foundation provides support, community, and advocacy for engineers facing the imposter syndrome and burnout that nearly ended my career. The institutional scaling ensured that support extended beyond individual mentorship to systematic assistance for thousands of engineers struggling with similar challenges. Professional conferences prominently featured mental health tracks alongside technical content. We're acknowledging that engineer well-being is as important to industry success as the latest algorithms or frameworks. Cultural normalization of mental health discussions reduced stigma that had previously prevented engineers from seeking support they needed. Tech companies began tracking and publishing mental health metrics alongside diversity statistics. Transparency about well-being outcomes holds us accountable for creating sustainable work environments. Public accountability created competitive pressure as companies with poor mental health outcomes faced recruitment disadvantages and reputational damage. Insurance companies recognized tech industry mental health crisis and developed specialized coverage. The Harper Protocols demonstrated need for comprehensive mental health support specifically designed for high-pressure technical industries. Market response to demonstrated need created infrastructure supporting sustainable practices across the industry. Legislative proposals addressed systematic overtime expectations and mandatory rest periods. Tech industry has operated under assumptions that salaried employees can work unlimited hours. That's changing as we recognize the human costs. Regulatory interests signaled that voluntary industry reform might become legal requirement if companies failed to address systematic problems. Naomi's technical contributions continued alongside. Her advocacy work, her algorithm improvements had generated measurable value while working sustainable hours that proved excellence didn't require personal sacrifice. I'm more productive now than during my burnout period because I'm bringing my whole self to work rather than just fragments surviving exhaustion, Naomi explained during industry presentations. Professional organizations established awards recognizing companies demonstrating commitment to engineer well-being. The Harper Excellence Award honors employers who prove that supporting mental health serves technical innovation. Recognition programs created incentives reinforcing cultural transformation as companies competed for reputation as employers prioritizing sustainable work conditions. Research institutions studied the Harper Protocol's impact on technical innovation. Contrary to fears that accommodating mental health would reduce productivity, we're finding that sustainable practices enhance creativity and long-term contribution. Academic validation provided evidence base supporting continued expansion of policies that prioritized well-being alongside technical excellence. International tech communities adopted similar frameworks. The Harper Protocol represents globally applicable approach to supporting technical talent while maintaining human dignity. Cross-cultural implementation demonstrated that sustainable excellence transcended specific national or corporate contexts to represent universal human needs. 2 years after returning to Google, Naomi had transformed industry assumptions about necessary trade-offs between excellence and well-being, proving that supporting mental health enhanced rather than diminished technical capabilities that served innovation. The barista who had hidden her brilliance had become industry leader, demonstrating that talent flourished when institutions adapted to support rather than exploit human capacity, creating sustainable excellence that served both individual well-being and collective technical advancement. 3 years after fixing Alex Whitmore's code on a coffee shop napkin, Naomi Harper stood before 5,000 attendees at the International Tech Conference, delivering keynote address that symbolized complete personal and professional transformation from hidden brilliance to influential leadership. I spent 18 months making coffee because I believed I'd failed at being a software engineer, Naomi told the audience. The truth was that the industry had failed by creating conditions that treated burnout as badge of honor rather than preventable crisis. Her honest testimony combined personal vulnerability with systematic critique that resonated with thousands of engineers who had experienced similar struggles without her platform for advocacy. CEO Pierce, attending to support her presentation, reflected on institutional transformation her return had catalyzed. Naomi's courage in returning taught us that supporting mental health isn't accommodation. It's prerequisite for sustainable excellence that serves everyone. His executive endorsement reinforced that well-being protocols represented strategic priority rather than temporary experiment in employee satisfaction. The Harper Protocol had become industry standard implemented across hundreds of tech companies, its principles protecting thousands of engineers who might otherwise have experienced the burnout that had nearly ended Naomi's career. Statistical evidence demonstrated measurable impact. Engineer retention rates among underrepresented groups had improved 47%, mental health crisis incidents had decreased 63%, and technical productivity had increased. As sustainable work conditions enhanced rather than diminished innovation. Numbers represent individual lives transformed and potential preserved, Foundation Director Foster emphasized. But beyond statistics, we've challenged fundamental assumptions about what excellence requires and who belongs in technical careers. Naomi's mother, Gloria, attended the keynote with pride transcending professional achievement. Watching you reclaim your brilliance after that dark period taught our family that setbacks don't define us. How we respond to them does. Her maternal perspective acknowledged that personal transformation had required confronting, rather than hiding from the abilities and identity that crisis had made terrifying. Former manager Wilson, whose patient support had helped enable Naomi's return, recognized broader institutional learning. Naomi taught us that losing talented engineers to burnout represented our failure, not theirs. We've restructured our entire culture around sustainable excellence because of lessons her experience provided. Coffee shop owner Brooks attended the conference with affectionate pride. I hired a shy barista who needed quiet work without pressure. I'm watching a confident leader who's transforming an entire industry. Both versions of Naomi deserved respect, but I'm glad she found her way back to her gifts. His presence acknowledged that her barista period had served necessary, healing purpose rather than representing wasted time or professional failure. Alex Whitmore, whose broken code had accidentally exposed Naomi's hidden brilliance, now served on Harper Foundation board. That napkin solution changed my startup's trajectory. But more importantly, it catalyzed industry transformation that's helped thousands of engineers. Sometimes small moments of courage create massive ripple effects. His perspective connected individual kindness to systematic impact that neither could have anticipated during their cafe encounter. Best, friend Jasmine's constant support throughout Naomi's crisis and recovery demonstrated that personal relationships had sustained her when professional identity had failed. I never doubted you'd find your way back to your brilliance. I'm just glad you discovered you could be brilliant without sacrificing your humanity, Sister Destiny, whose blunt challenges had helped push Naomi toward reclaiming her technical identity, celebrated transformation with characteristic directness. You stopped hiding from being amazing. The world is better because you found the courage to try again. Tech journalist Johnson, whose reporting had helped amplify Naomi's story, reflected on cultural change. 3 years ago, admitting mental health struggles would have ended tech careers. Now it's seen as strength that enhances rather than diminishes professional credibility. That's revolutionary progress. The Harper Foundation had supported over 2,000 engineers through mental health crises while helping them maintain rather than abandon their technical careers. We're preventing the talent loss that the industry can't afford an individual shouldn't have to experience. Universities reported that computer science enrollment among women and underrepresented minorities had increased significantly as Harper Protocol implementation made tech careers seem sustainable rather than requiring personal sacrifice. Students are choosing tech because they see they can have careers that honor their whole selves. Naomi's technical contributions continued alongside her advocacy work. Her algorithm innovations had generated substantial value while working balanced hours that demonstrated sustainable productivity exceeded burnout performance over time. I'm a better engineer now than during my burnout period because I'm bringing creativity and insight that exhaustion prevented, Naomi explained. Rest isn't luxury, it's prerequisite for excellence. Professional recognition included awards for both technical contribution and industry leadership. Harper represents rare combination of exceptional engineering ability and transformational cultural impact. Her influence extended beyond tech industry as other high-pressure professions examined their own cultures. Medicine, law, finance, and academia all began implementing similar well-being protocols, recognizing that burnout represented systematic failure rather than individual weakness. During the keynote's conclusion, Naomi addressed the audience with message combining gratitude, challenge, and hope. I'm grateful to everyone who supported my return and believed in sustainable excellence. But our work isn't finished. We've made progress. But too many talented people still face impossible choices between their careers and their mental health. She challenged the industry. Every engineer forced out by burnout represents our collective failure. Every talented person hiding their abilities because they're terrified of breaking again shows we haven't created truly sustainable conditions. We can do better. Her call to continued action acknowledged progress while refusing to declare victory when systematic problems remained. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes, recognition not just of her personal journey but of the cultural transformation she had catalyzed and the thousands of careers her courage had helped preserve. Naomi left the stage. She understood that her identity now encompassed both the shy barista who had needed refuge and the confident engineer who had reclaimed her brilliance. Both versions were authentic, and the integration of vulnerability and strength made her more effective as both technologist and advocate. Most importantly, she had discovered that true excellence didn't require sacrificing her humanity, that asking for help demonstrated strength rather than weakness, and that her value extended beyond her code to include the cultural transformation her story had inspired. The journey from Google engineer to barista to industry leader had taught her that setbacks could catalyze growth, that vulnerability could become power, and that one person's courage to be fully human could give thousands of others permission to do the same. The napkin that had accidentally exposed her hidden brilliance now hung, framed in the Harper Foundation office, reminder that small moments of compassion could transform individual lives and entire industries. When courage to help overcame fear of exposure 3 years after, nearly losing herself to burnout and shame, Naomi Harper had discovered that her greatest contribution wasn't just the elegant code she wrote, but the permission she gave others to be brilliant, vulnerable, and fully human in industries that had demanded they choose between their gifts and their well-being. That transformation, from hiding to healing, from isolation to impact, from fear to flourishing, represented the kind of change that made both individual lives and collective culture more humane, more sustainable, and more capable of honoring the full humanity of everyone who contributed their talents to building the future. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.